This is the House of Parliament where men and women have sat for decades, making decisions that would affect all our lives. Do they really work in the interests of the people or themselves? They sit at the round tables, trying to decipher which way to turn. Is it left or is it right? Have the people benefited from those decisions? Our people have suffered for far too long. Change should not be a figment of the imagination, but reality. Every boy, every girl, every man, every woman are equally important. The market vendor joyfully sells her produce. The fish vendor skillfully uses his cutlass to cut the fish. Keep on working. Let your smile be your motivation. Build a community of brotherly and sisterly love. Don't give up on your dreams. Surround yourself with positive thinkers. Think big and keep on moving. Keep pushing the envelope. Yes, push that envelope until you have succeeded. You may have made many mistakes, but that is no reason to stop. Don't you dare give up. Get ready for that overflow. Get ready for that breakthrough. The overflow is coming. Showers of blessings. Stay cool. Stay calm. Stay collective. Ride the rough waves of life. Hold on to that rope tightly. Just keep working. Keep moving. Keep believing. Self-motivation. Good night, everyone, and welcome to Lies and Deceit. I know you guys are over the moon. Well, Flo, let me explain to you. I just did an internet speed, and our internet speed 210 megabytes per second, and my upload speed is 26 megabytes per second. So don't form the ass tonight. Don't touch my internet. Anyway, my people, how are y'all doing tonight? How was your day? We have the man himself in the house tonight. We have Uncle Shas, so cool. I just don't understand. What the hell was Senotions thinking about? Uncle Chad is like, oh, I cool Sohria, I cool Sohria, you that's the star. I'm like, hello, I'm the star. He say, yeah man, Sohria, you that's the star, not me. I say, Uncle Chas, you that's the top dog. So Uncle Chas is here with us tonight, and I'm going to interview him. I'm gonna let you see who Uncle Chas is. My God, you people, I love y'all. The coffees are flowing left, right, and center, and I want to thank you all for that. Now, Esupawe, Ray Charles, 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 Esupawe. My people, we're gonna have fun with Uncle Chas. Ray Charles, I have groove like that, sir. Ray Charles, hot like that. Ray Charles cannot see. Ray Charles, Passada say. Ray Charles cannot see. Esupawe. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna send out birthday wishes, and we are gonna come with Uncle Chas. So let me say happy birthday. It had to be done, but the person sent it to me late. So to a wonderful mother, grandmother, relative, we would like to wish this wonderful Elvira Blondell. We would like to, your entire family are wishing you belated birthday greetings. They love you, and they want to share in the joy of your birthday. And your daughter, Lucy Blondell, from New York, she's one of my supporters. She is the one who sent it to say happy birthday to you, Mom. And from me to Mom, 86 years. You batting for a long time. I have ways to meet that there. So, Miss Blondell, Elvira Blondell, from your family and from all, your loved ones, happy birthday. And especially from your daughter, Lucy Blondell. Thank you so much, Lucy, for allowing me to wish your mom 86 years. Whoa. 86 years. Thank you, Lucy. And Mom, do enjoy, every day, Mom, should be your birthday because you have reached a milestone, 86 years. Thank you. And we're going to play Esupawe, and then we are going to bring the star in. Because we have a lot to talk about.
Already.
Esupawe. Ray Charles Esupawe. Ray Charles Esupawe. Ray Charles Esupawe. Okay, guys, let's get down to business. Let us meet the man himself, the man all of you have been waiting to hear. A former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, 2016 to 2021. The political leader of the United Workers' Party from 2013 until now, and the leader of the opposition United Workers' Party from July 2021. He is also a father. He is also a dedicated husband. And I can tell you he dotes over his wife. I won't tell you our little secret, but he dotes over his wife. So let us just welcome, as we affectionately call him, Uncle Chas. Go ahead, Mr. Chastanet. Uncle Chas, say hello to my viewers.
First of all, great to be here with you, Soso, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. I've never been interviewed by you before, so I feel very honored tonight that that's going to happen. And I just want to say to all your viewers, thank you. Thank you for listening to a different side. Thank you for being critical thinkers and wanting the best for your country. And best for your country means that we're not going to be loyal to anybody. What we're going to be loyal to is the development of our country and the truth.
Yeah, and Mr. Chastanet, just apart from, we know you as the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, we know you as the leader of the opposition, we know you as the political leader of the United Workers' Party. Just tell us the soft side of Mr. Chastanet, Uncle Chas. What do you love? Your favorite color, the foods you love, because I saw you eating a nice plate of food and a cat was sitting by you. I should have put that picture up tonight, you and the cat, where you were having a meal. I believe personally a picture tells 1,000 words, and you can really tell the personality of that person. So just give us a little rundown of the softer side of Uncle Chas.
Well, I grew up for the beginning of part of my life here in St. Lucia. Mm-hmm. I left here when I was around 7, and we moved to Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. So I lived in Puerto Rico for 5 years, and that's why I speak Spanish. Mm-hmm. And afterwards, we moved to Miami for 2 years, and then I came back to St. Lucia. And it was a very difficult adjustment coming back into the school system into St. Lucia after being in Puerto Rico and in Miami. I went to comprehensive school the first year that Compre opened up. Mm-hmm. I stayed there until Christmas, and then I left and I went to St. Mary's College, and I lasted there until Easter. Okay. And on all occasions, I was begging my father to let me leave St. Lucia, and I wanted to go to school outside. And he was very concerned. For a person who was 15 years of age, wanting to leave home. But I just felt that I needed more exposure. And how do I say this? That the education system in those days, Sohria, and still in many cases, not only here in St. Lucia, other parts of the world, they want to teach you how to memorize.
Yes.
And that's just not who I was.
Right.
I like to understand that many times we don't have all the information, and it's how do you assess all of the things you do know relative to the things you don't know, and then how do you make a decision moving forward. So my father finally acquiesced, and I ended up going to Quebec, to school, a high school, a boarding school there. And it was an interesting time because I went there in 1976, and that was just when Canada was going through constitutional reform. So Canada didn't have their own constitution, and Pierre Trudeau, the Prime Minister then, was in the process of rewriting a constitution. And the province of Quebec was going through a tremendous amount of hardship because English-speaking Canadians coming from Ontario or from Winnipeg or from British Columbia who came to Quebec were given the choice of language. They could get their kids educated in English. They could have law in English. Signage was in both French and English. And Pierre Trudeau, who was also originally from Quebec, knew that if he made that consent to make Canada completely bilingual, that more than likely some of the provinces would not have supported the constitutional reform. So when the constitution was reformed, Quebec passed a bill called Bill 101. It's a very interesting bill in that anybody who came to Quebec had to be educated in French. The only language in the courts was French. And this was an idea to preserve the French culture.
Yes.
And, I really applaud that. But what happened was many of the businesses that had their headquarters in Montreal left and went to Ontario. And Quebec paid a very, very heavy price.
For that.
For a very, very long time.
Yes.
But the softer side to me is that I've always been interested in economic development and the development of what we call third world countries. I have a huge soft spot for persons who are the underdogs. I think that I share that in common with a lot of solutions. And I love to see people who are expected not to achieve when they can overcome those circumstances. So when persons hear or see me crying, it generally is at events in which people have been overachievers. When I went to an event and there were parents who Sandals had paid for their kids to go to school, and they had to achieve a certain grade level in order to be able to benefit from that. I know the sacrifice that parents had to make in order for their kids to succeed. Kids, for the most part, don't succeed by themselves. And it's a tremendous commitment on the parents' part.
Yes, it is.
When I see young people start new businesses and they're not supposed to succeed and they do succeed, I get very excited. Julian Alfred, she's a great example of a young girl who went to Trinidad to participate in a track tournament. A Jamaican coach really felt she had potential. And she came home and she didn't ask her mother whether she was going to go to Jamaica. She said, "Mom, I'm going to Jamaica."
That's right.
And she ended up living in several different households in order to achieve her goals.
Yes.
And she ended up getting a scholarship to go to the University of Texas, Austin. And she's doing incredibly well. She's world class.
She is.
And she continues to make tremendous sacrifices. None of these things come easy. Sometimes we sit there. Darren Sammy, coming from a country like St. Lucia, in which we really didn't have any examples of St. Lucians succeeding at that level. And not only did he make it onto the the West Indies cricket team, he ended up captaining it, and he ended up being the captain when they won 2 T20 international tournaments, which is unprecedented.
Yes.
And look, the list goes on and on of that. So I have a huge soft spot for that. I'm a big believer in sports. I think that sports teaches us a lot about life.
Yes,
and teaches you discipline. Teaches you competitiveness. It teaches you how to lose. It teaches you teamwork. And those persons who are great sportsmen, you can see that they very often apply those lessons to their life. I am very nationalistic, but I'm also a regionalist.
Yeah.
I think that we're too small to succeed by ourselves.
By ourselves, exactly.
And sadly, we only hear rhetoric about regionalism. We never see the action that
Actual
follows
fruits.
up.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I love music. As you've noticed, I love street food. I think that there's a term for that. I mean, so going to Gros Islet, going to Anse Lorraine,
Yeah.
going to my own constituency in Blasha, or getting some nice sauce and some boudin. I love even when I travel, I love to go to street cafes. I like to sit down. I like to watch people. I like to see how people approach the same things, but they approach them very differently.
Yes.
I always find that extremely intriguing.
Yeah, the cultural
I am a huge history buff. I mean, I sit and watch Netflix biographies and documentaries. I just watched Vikings. I can strongly recommend it to anybody who's interested in societal development, because it was very interesting when the Vikings started to go out of Norway and Sweden, and they invaded England. And they won, and they actually killed 2 kings while they were over there.
Yeah.
But what happened was they ended up becoming exposed to Catholicism, which came in conflict with their own gods.
Yes.
And then they went and took on Paris, and then they went to Rus, and then they also went and discovered Islam. And so all of a sudden, the world dramatically changed.
Yeah.
And then small fishing villages became trading posts, and the complication in managing the affairs of the people. And sadly, many of the traits that existed then sadly exist today. I mean, I think that Bob Marley has a song. I think one of the verses in the song says, "Who the hat fits, wear it."
Let them wear it. Yeah.
It's a great song. And sadly, in 2022, many of those personal traits of betrayal, jealousy, greed, still exist in our society, even though there are many examples to show that we can't succeed when there's individual greed. And I always have a great admiration for the generation of the 50s and the 60s here in St. Lucia. They came from extreme poverty, and mothers and fathers who were either farmers or vendors saved every single cent to make sure that their children could be educated. And so they became doctors, and they became lawyers, and they became accountants. That came at a huge sacrifice. And sadly, we don't have as many parents doing that today. It's almost like parents have said, it's the job of the state to raise my child. I'm going to spend money on myself at this point. So
at this time,
I'm very mixed up in that regard. I was, as you know, born in Martinique. My family heritage came from Martinique, the Montplaisis, and both on my father's side, and also my father's mother was a Montplaisy.
Okay.
My father's father was an outside child with a guy called Charles Chastanet. He had 3 outside children, 1 son and 2 daughters. And as obviously you know, when you're an outside child, at age 18, you can take on either your father's or mother's name. And my grandfather took on his father's name, and that's how he became a Chastanet. So, watching my father grow up, and people always associate with him in Minville Chastanet, but he was the outside child.
He was the
and
outside child.
That one day that he was able to succeed to the extent that he did really is just amazing, because my father only has a high school education. He never had the opportunity to go to university. So just a lot of common sense, a lot of very hard work. So that's in a nutshell who I am. As you said earlier, I am a very strong family man. I absolutely adore my wife. I have 2 amazing kids who give me the greatest amount of joy, and I love to see them succeed, and I just love the persons that they have become. Both of them have tremendous hearts.
Yes.
And I would say last but not least is that I'm very conflicted, because most people would think that the political side of Alan Chastanet came from my father. That's not true. The political side of me came from my mother. My mother was in Ireland. She was born in Ireland, left when she was 16 to become a nurse in England, because she thought that Ireland was too small.
Okay.
And ended up meeting some St. Lucian ladies who were also studying nursing. So she came out with them before she was on her way to Canada. And she saw my father by where Royal Bank is on the boulevard, and fell in love and said, "That's the man I'm going to marry."
Wow.
And she actually did marry him, and she got stuck in St. Lucia. So, thinking that Ireland was too small. And I always say that God has a sense of humor. But my mom is a socialist. She is all heart. And my father is, in many ways, all head. So I would say to you, for the first 25, 27 years of my life,
yes,
I was all heart. And then I got to appreciate the head of my father.
Yeah.
And so this is why I always say to people that I have a very social heart, and I have a very strong business head. And it's to find the balance between those two, because that's how you get sustainability.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And one thing I realized about your father, well, your father may not remember me, but my dad, my late dad, and your dad was very close in that my father used to build many of your dad's buildings for him, and your dad used to come to my home. I remember him. But one thing I find about your father, and every child would want that kind of love from their father. I looked at your father during the time you were political leader of the party, and then when you were running to become prime minister of this country, and when you became prime minister of this country, I found that your father stood by your side. Tell us about that relationship, because as you are a son and you have such a heavy burden, a country to run, and your father was always by your side. Just tell my viewers, how was that relationship with your dad during your time and your reign as Prime Minister of St. Lucia?
So maybe I'll go back a little bit. So my time in politics really started before then. The first time I ever went to a political meeting in my life, wearing a color. I mean, I may have gone to the boulevard now and then, past like everybody in the back, just to listen to what was going on, but never really participated.
Yeah.
So the first time I ever really actively participated or deliberately went to a rally to support a party was Spider's launch in Grosvenor.
Okay.
And I had moved back to St. Lucia to open up Coco Palm. And when I came back to St. Lucia, I had two choices as to where I could have built the hotel. So one is where Coco Palm is, and the second one would have been by Shock, where my father's home was, on the beach. I have to say to Sohria, the easier choice would have been to build it on the beach. I would have been very, very independent.
Yeah.
But I had worked with Chris Blackwell from Island Records, and we had a bunch of properties in South Beach. And I really fell in love with the concept of village tourism. In fact, when I went to work for Chris Blackwell in 1992, when I left here as director of tourism, it was for village tourism. We had a very, very long talk at a restaurant in London, and I explained to him what my vision was, and he said, "Boy, this is exactly what I want to do." So for those persons who know Jamaica, Chris had a property called Golden Eye, which is where Ian Fleming wrote the James Bond movies. And just above Golden Eye was a place called Rockabessa. Very, very cool village. And we were going to build the first village tourism project there. And then when I went to South Beach and understood, build the properties off the back of the beach so the beach remains public, and that you now can have a Creole mix of hotel rooms. So you can have 5-star hotel rooms, and you can have bed and breakfasts. And all the people would mingle at the clubs and at the restaurants, and everybody would go back to whichever type of hotel they wanted to. And I just love that. The word it would be eclectic. I hate when I go to a hotel and everybody's the same, So
it's true.
When I decided to choose Coco Creole and Coco Palm, I'd had a long discussion with the then Prime Minister, Kenny Anthony, who I had a very good relationship with, and explained to him that by choosing Coco Palm, that the beach of the hotel really was the village, the sidewalks, the roads, the landscaping, etc.
Yes.
He said, no problem. And I said, what I would like to get is the occupancy tax for the hotel for the first 5 years to go into what's called the Rodney Bay Village Fund, which was the residences, the restaurants, and all the hotels would have shared, and at least there would have been some money to help improve the public spaces, including the beach facilities. Sadly, that did not happen. Other promises were made, and sadly, those were not delivered. And I just decided, look, enough is enough. And I went and supported the United Workers' Party. Nobody asked me to. I put a yellow shirt on and went. So the funny part of that story was 3 days later, my father summoned me to his home. And he sat me down in his balcony. He said, what have you done? I said, what do you mean? He said, our family is PIP. Right? We don't get involved in politics. I said, well, Dad, I'm 40 and you're 75. There's no way that I'm going to sit here and watch this Labour government mismanage this country.
Exactly.
And I'm certainly not a person who can sit on the sidelines and just accept it.
Yes.
So I'm going to get involved. So he was not a very, very happy person when I first got involved in politics. And then it got worse because one thing was to be a senator and to be a minister. And then when I made the decision to run in Sohria,
yes.
he thought for sure I'd lost my mind. It was completely crazy, right? And I can say I don't think it was a criticism, but my father and my wife and my family were not very big supporters of me in those early days.
Yes,
they were morally supporting me, but they didn't come out and actively participate in the campaign.
Yes.
And so after the election, I had decided I was not going to get involved in politics actively for elected politics, and my intention was to vie for the chairmanship of the party. Because really my forte is what I call strategic management, building organizations. And I thought, okay, at least I could do my own business without there being any conflicts, and I would be able to support the party. And after the elections, there was a huge controversy in the party with regards to Richard Fedrick. Because Richard was really not supposed to have run in the 2011 elections as a candidate of the United Workers' Party. So if you remember, he eventually resigned from the cabinet, and the decision was that he was going to run as an independent in Castries Central, and we would not put up a candidate.
Right.
And if in fact that he was able to clear his name and get his visa back, we would bring him back into the party at that point. But that was the condition to it. And the then Prime Minister, Stephen King, made the decision by himself. And we were at the launch of Andy Daniel in Dennery, and Richard just appeared on the stage. And people say, well, you could have walked off the stage and stuff like that. But look, when you're in the heat of things and in solidarity of a party, people just make the best decision they could at that particular point. So we all ran with Richard. And when we lost, we made the decision that unless Richard could give us an explanation as to why he lost his visa, then he could not be in the forefront of the party, meaning run as a candidate. Obviously, that did not go down very well. We also wanted the party to be restructured because there were a lot of mistakes that were made. So, for instance, Stephen King was selected by the MPs to be the leader after Sir John's death. There was never really a meeting of the party to endorse him. And the first convention that he participated was the one at the Comprehensive School, in which we agreed, because he was Prime Minister, that he would not be contested.
Right.
So actually the first time that Steve was contested at a convention was when I ran against him after the elections. So that's how I cut my teeth in politics. And what happened was some of the candidates came to me and the constituency branches and asked me to run as leader. So I said to them, no problem, I'll run as leader, but I'm going to run under the leadership under two conditions. One was that I had the support of 11 of the constituencies, and two, that if ever they changed their mind, all they had to do was come and speak to me and say that we want to go in a different direction. And that was sufficient for me. I don't need to hear the reason why. Just let me know, and then we would work together to make sure there would be a smooth transition.
Exactly.
So this has not been a burning desire in my life to be a Prime Minister. I feel there's lots of ways I can make contributions to the development of the country.
Exactly.
So I'm not one of the, Sir John, when he realized I was going to go in politics, he gave me a very, very important message. And a message that I repeat very often and learn more and more how deep of a statement it is. So he said to me, "You're going to go into politics." I said, "I think so, Sir John." He said, "Well, let me give you some word of advice." He said, "Do not ever become accustomed to a lifestyle in politics that you cannot afford yourself." And it has so many meanings, because many people might focus on afford and think it's money. It's not. When you become a prime minister of a country, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of people who want to know you and who want to be around you. These are friends of the prime minister. These are not your friends. It doesn't make them bad people. But understand, when you're no longer prime minister, they're no longer going to be with you. Luckily for me, I knew that and understood that extremely well going in. So the idea of people calling you prime minister and opening your door and all the courtesies that are extended to you, the deference that people pay to you, are things that you should never become accustomed to. Try to remain as humble as possible. And so the transition from being prime minister to where I am today has actually been very, very, very easy for me.
Yeah.
I've tried to live my life the same way that I always try to live my life. I think that the only concession that I made it was because my wife just threatened me. She said, "You are not going to drive yourself like Sir John." I said, she goes, "You're constantly on the phone, and in today's world, that if you got into an accident, you would just be crucified." So she goes, "You have to promise me that you will not." So I consented.
She is right,
to having...
Uncle Chas. She is right, Uncle Chas, because you're always on the phone when you're always busy. So she was right. The wives always know what's best for their husbands. So she was right.
Yes. But sometimes it gives the wrong impression when people see you being driven around. I can say to St. Lucians, it was an honor, but it's nothing that I take for granted. And that's not who I am at all. They have some people who are around me always hear me say the same thing. Life is like being on a rocking chair. Or warring is like being on a rocking chair. It keeps you busy and it gets you nowhere. So I'm one of those persons that doesn't lament the past. I very much focus on the future.
Yes.
What can I learn from the past?
Now, Uncle Chas,
how do I apply that moving forward?
Yeah, let me just butt in there. And I found, and many other people who have been studying you, I found that the transition was very, very, very easy for you in terms of not being the Prime Minister of St. Lucia and now you are the leader of the opposition. The transition was so easy for you, and we can see it in your demeanor. You hold no grudges. You do not behave in a way that you're angry. You lost the election, and I think many people appreciate that. Now I need to ask you, Uncle Chas, tell me, how did you feel during the 2021 election, where the narrative was he's a white boy, and he's not one of us, and if we elect him as prime minister, he's only going to give his friends, his family, the elites, he's only going to look out for them? How did that make you feel? Because I see you, Uncle Chas, I see you as a human being. Your skin color may be different from mine, but I see you as a human being. And I think St. Lucians are now regretting that we listen to the narrative that he is white and we must vote a proud black man. So let us, my viewers, know how you felt during that season and this type of narrative.
At times it was very painful. Politics is very similar all over the world. I remember before the elections in 2016, I had the opportunity of going to Jamaica, I had the opportunity of going to Trinidad. I also went to the UK, and there were a lot of lessons I learned. That messaging has to remain very simple.
Very simple.
A lot of people who participate in elections literally come up to look at what's going on just before the elections, and they hone in on one of two things. So I remember when we had five to stay alive, and the Labour Party, the 2 days later, came out with 15 things. And I laughed, and the media person said, what's the problem? I said, we have difficulty remembering the 10 commandments.
Yes, it's true. I can't remember all.
So the point is, Sohria, is that I clearly understood that there became a point where people had stopped listening. And it didn't matter how I answered a question or what evidence I provided. People had almost made up their mind to some extent. One of the things I tried to do when I first became Prime Minister was to develop what's called a private sector council. So the merging of the bigger associations, they have their individual associations but create one entity. And that I wanted them to identify a tax, and I would allow the money for that tax to go into it. And here's what I mean. And we had that discussion at the last sitting of the House. There is no independent source of information that can help people ascertain the truth from fiction. Sadly, and again, I'm careful how I say this because media houses play a very important role, but sadly, some of the media houses continue to be extremely biased.
Very biased.
And very, very hypocritical in their approach to the news. People say, oh, your PR sucked. We put out so much information. But sadly, there were three major, Solutions still get the majority of their news from TV news. And the vast majority of those outlets were very much against my party.
Yes,
for whatever
and they still
reason.
are. And they still are.
In many ways, I mean, I just sit and you shake your head. So it's very difficult. So, that's why in the House session, and I know that you and I have a common friend. We can call him our friend.
Uncle Chastanet
and I
may be
said
more
to him,
humble than me.
I think, look, I said to him that he deserves to get a PhD, an honorary PhD in psychology, because he's mastered the art of half-truths.
Oh, yes.
So the half-truth is to start a sentence, don't finish it, and let people's
open-ended
negativity complete it. So I gave him some examples now. So I said, when you said that the Rodney Bay Roundabout was built on Michael Chastanet's land, that's a true statement. But if you finish the sentence and you say, the Rodney Bay Roundabout is built on 400 square feet owned by Michael Chastanet, and he gave it for free, it's a very different perspective.
He never said that. Yes.
When you said that Alan Chastanet owns land in Moule Chic, and that's why he supports DSH, well, that's a true statement. The fact is that Alan Chastanet owns a quarter of an acre of land in Moule Chic. And yes, I do support DSH. When you say that Michael Chastanet rents office space to the government of St. Lucia, it's a true statement, but you don't finish it. You say Michael Chastanet has been renting office space for 25 years to the government of St. Lucia at a rental rate of $3 a square foot. So people are not renting places from my father because they love him. They're renting it because it's a good deal. Nobody else is providing it. And then when he said that we put horses in an air-conditioned plane, I said, well, who is we? We was Tewa King. He paid for the horses to go. How else would you want a horse to travel 14, 15 hours?
Exactly.
Then when he says that we spent $110 million on building a horse racing track, I said, okay, well, who's we? We was Tewa King. So the fact is, a man came here, said he was going to build a horse racing track, spent $110 million of his own money to build a horse racing track, used all local contractors, helped train young guys to get into that industry, and we have a problem with that? So this is where our country had ended up. And I honestly believed that the evidence was there, that many people hopefully would have been able to make up their minds for themselves. Sadly, the relentlessness of the Labour campaign of Alan must go, I am the racist remarks that were made on both sides, because I think that there were some people on my side who also made racist remarks, and racism really has no place in our country.
No, it doesn't.
And sadly, I campaigned on building a new St. Lucia. Up until the end of 2019, we had lowered the unemployment rate. We had brought the debt to GDP down below 60%. We'd had 3 consecutive years of economic growth. We had a significant number of the airport project, the St. Jude Hospital, the West Coast Road, hotel developments, the call centers. Everything was about to take off, and then we got hit COVID.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sadly, persons were not able to make that distinction. And I think that Marvin Charles from Monrepo put it really well when he said, I thought Alan Chastanet hated me because of the
Marvin, are you there?
of the protocols that we had put in.
Yes.
And I think, you know, again, we can see now the hypocrisy. They talked about there was 2 solutions.
Yes.
Have they come in to change anything?
Yes. No.
Okay.
No,
they said
haven't.
the protocols were wrong. All they did is they changed the command center to the management center. They changed curfew to confinement. But it's all exactly the same things. In fact, every time that they've tried to go off on their own ideas, they've had to reverse themselves and go back to exactly what we were doing.
Exactly.
But I'm really hoping that Sohria, and you know, in some ways, maybe what has happened is a godsend.
I think so too.
I think that there was a very good possibility that we would have won 7 seats, Labour would have won 8 seats, and Richard and Steve would have won their seats. And I think that that's exactly what the Coppola was all about. And can you imagine where we would be if Stephenson King and Richard Frederick had that kind of influence as to who was going to be in government? So it's bad enough that after the Labour Party won 13 seats, they felt compelled to bring these 2 guys into their party. So it just tells you the relationship that existed before the elections. And it's only a matter of time because these policies that they're implementing right now, and I think that when we see the budget unfold, the reality is going to come. You know, the promise of the $4,000 threshold, that's not going to happen.
No, it's not.
The promise of the property taxes being taken off, that's not going to happen.
No.
The $1,500, that's not going to happen. Universal health care. How is the government going to afford to do universal health care? And I think that they even have some more difficult decisions to make, and that's why they're already doing the typical propaganda of the Labour Party, trying to say that they inherited a mess. I mean, which country was not a mess post-COVID?
That's right.
And the fact is that there was a budget 3 months before the elections where all the numbers were revealed. There was a Carrie Chris report. There was an IMF statement report. The Ministry of Finance deliberately came out and gave an exhaustive, detailed report on the state of the economy. And yet, in spite of all the evidence that was going on, they went and made those promises. And sadly, many people believed that they were going to do those things.
And let me ask you something, Uncle Chas. You know, I am happy I'm giving you the time to speak because what I have realized in this country, people believe a lie before the truth. Now, I would like to ask you, what would you have done differently in terms of the COVID management from July up until now?
I mean, when it first came out in April?
No. I personally believe, even if I and some
others...
I
mean from after the elections?
Yeah, after the elections, like what would you have done differently if you were in this government's place?
Well, look, we had already had the experience of the Labour Party march, and we'd had the experience of the Christmas outbreak. So when you're going to have elections is the same thing. It's personal interactions.
Exactly.
So what they needed to do was immediately slow down the activity of the country. And we know what those are. That's tighter curfews. And sadly, and I know solutions hate to hear that, but because of the number of people that are vaccinated in this country, which is only 30% now, back then it was even less, we have to be very protective of the more vulnerable people in our society. And so alcohol is a significant contributor to social behavior. So there just needed to be a tightening for about maybe a month to 6 weeks. Not close down your borders, but just slow things down to allow the country to recover. So we should have never had. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, Sohria. In 18 months, we had 88 deaths. And we had 5,500 active cases. And only 5% of the country was vaccinated. And really, that was only the latter part. In 6 months, the Labour Party has had close to 260 deaths and 17 or 18,000 cases. So their policies have not worked.
No, it hasn't.
So that was the first thing I would have done. The second thing would have been Christmas and New Year's. You cannot say that you care about kids going back to school. You cannot say that you're concerned about people's livelihoods and allow people to go out to the extent that they did over the Christmas period. Because we already had the experience. We had the experience from the previous Christmas. We had the experience from the elections. And so the huge spike that we've had, and particularly, we saw what was coming. I mean, it was only a matter of time before Omicron was going to be in St. Lucia. And it was very, very quick spreader. So by not doing that, not sacrificing the 2 weeks over the Christmas and New Year's, cost kids missing school for 3 weeks. Has cost how many people their lives. And more importantly, businesses have had to shut down by themselves. The government didn't shut them down. They shut down themselves because of the number of people that were sick, and we could all see what the impact is. So if you genuinely say lives and livelihoods, you're supposed to understand the balance between the two. There's no government that can be concerned about the two things and prevent anyone from not getting COVID. That's impossible. So the criteria is that the number of people who are infected, as well as the number of people who are in hospital, because we only have the 100 beds.
Exactly.
And those things help guide you in terms of the economic activity that you're going to have. Similarly, if you close down the economy too much, then the impact is not only on individual households, it's also going to be on the government. So that's the balance we set. And I sit here and I laugh and I shake my head because all the way back in April of 2020, when it first came, if you remember, we used the term coexisting with COVID. And now in Europe and America and Canada, everybody's saying, look, we need to get on with this. We need to learn to live with COVID. The second term that I coined, and I believe it will become very fashionable very soon, is post-COVID trauma. And that's what I was trying to allude to in the House, which is the inflation, which is the distribution systems, which is COVID has caused many marginal businesses to be closed. And now there are new businesses that are opening up. And so there is a huge shakeup globally and also in St. Lucia. The government just doesn't seem to have a pulse for that. They don't have a sense as to where they're going. So I would say that those would be automatically some things that we would have put in place that I think would have yielded significantly different numbers from a health perspective. And I think economically the country would have been in a much better place. I mean, I certainly, Sohria, would not have stopped the St. Jude's Hospital. St. Jude's Hospital would have been finished by now. I would not have stopped the Rodney Bay Road. I would not have taken Fresh Start out. I mean, here's a company that's putting their own money in. Government St. Lucia didn't have to put 1 cent in. We're employing all those persons and creating economic activity. Those were all helping to fill the gap that the contraction in tourism created. There was no other sector that could have replaced tourism as quickly as construction and the call centers. And I thought that we did an amazing job of doing that. We created the largest economic stimulus program. And sadly, the narrative that the Labour Party put out is that we were doing these projects to help ourselves, that there was some form of corruption going on. And again, I want to remind your viewers, when we became the government in 2016, June, the first meeting of the House after I was swearing in, there was a recommendation from the Ramshaw-Horde report. I don't know if you remember the Ramshaw-Horde report, Sohria. The Ramshaw-Horde report was done to investigate Hyatt Hotel, Sandals Hotel, and the cost overruns and NDC. And in that report, it was recommended that the Crown Prosecution Act be amended to take away the statute of limitations. So the investigation found a lot of wrongdoing. I think the term that they used was maladministration. But sadly, the time had expired in order to be able to hold these people accountable. So when my government came in, we amended it, and now there's no time limitation. The statute, the bar has been removed, and therefore, doesn't matter how many years after the fact, any evidence of wrongdoing, and the person is convicted, it will stand up in the court. And that was important. And and the things that we were doing to try to create greater transparency and greater accountability, and somehow that information got misconstrued, got lost in the interpretation. And I get it. People were very emotional, Sohria, about their future because of COVID.
Yes.
And they were very, very nervous. And I think they were more easily persuaded. And sadly, it helped mobilize the labor base, but it caused the more conservative persons in the United Workers' Party, particularly what Stephenson King did at the end, not to come out and vote. So you talk about a caste-free Central, 40% voter turnout.
Yeah, it's very low.
The whole nation was 51% voter turnout.
Yes, that's not good.
And the 13 candidates of the Labour Party got 51% of the popular vote. So this is not a resounding victory by any means. No. It is a majority in the House. I'm very optimistic about United Workers' Party. I think that the introspection that's taking place is very, very, very important. And everything's on the table. And that's why I've said to my party, I've offered them my letter of resignation. And even though they didn't accept it, I've said that the letter of resignation sits on this table until the report is completed. And I'm prepared to take whatever responsibility for the loss is. But I say to you, I focus on the future. I will also accept whatever responsibility, whatever role the party chooses for me in moving forward.
Okay, now let me ask you another question, Uncle Chas. Stephenson King in the House last week, Tuesday, when he had a go at you, he accused you of playing with scholarships. For instance, if all the scholarships are on the table, if the person was not yellow, they would not have gotten a scholarship. Can you clarify this for me, please?
Well, if Stephenson King was the patriot that he claims he was, and if he also believed what he said to everybody, that he will always win his seat, then why didn't he leave the party? When there was the vote of no confidence, why didn't he vote against me?
Exactly.
Right? That's absurd. And that's not how scholarships are done. Right? So a lot of scholarships are based on the recommendations of the Ministry of Education, which is on two things. The capacity of a family, the wealth, and how well the kid has done. And in the case of the civil servants, how many scholarships they've gotten, and whether in fact what they're studying is on a priority list.
Exactly.
So the discretionary decisions in cabinet are very, very small. I remember a person, I won't mention his name, but he's a Labour supporter. He always has been, but I've always had a reasonably good relationship with him. And when we first came in, his daughter was one of the persons that qualified or was in the short list for an Island Scholar. And we're only allowed to give one. And the difference between the three of them was 1/10 of a point.
Wow.
Okay? And we spent a fair amount of time discussing it, and the idea was really we felt the best thing to do would have been given all three a scholarship. But then when we were told how much it would cost, that was outside of our thing, and therefore we had to go with the recommendation of the other person. And that person has held that vendetta against me all this time. And again, when information goes out of cabinet, and sadly, even though it's supposed to be a very confidential place, information does go out. And you never know who is using the information to try to improve their relationship with somebody else. Oh, it wasn't me that didn't support it. It was this person who didn't support it and everything else. Stephenson King has been in politics long enough. And certainly, I'm not going to come here after the fact and expose Steve's sins. Because the time for me to have exposed them would have been when he was with me. So my lips are sealed, but I would say to you, I've learned a very valuable lesson in moving forward. And I'm very proud as to how the party treated Steve. Because remember,
yes.
When Steve refused to let go of Richard Frederick, the party went to a convention, which is a democratic process, and he lost, and I won by 2/3 majority.
Wow.
The second time around, Stephenson King supported Claudius Prevost, and they lost by the same margin. Stephenson King was also still the leader of the opposition, because remember, we had 6 people in the House. And he kept on fraternizing with the Labour Party and not sharing information with our party. I can say this because this was all made public.
Yeah.
And so the party was very upset, particularly after the Christmas trough, in how he behaved. And therefore, we had a meeting, which was a 9-hour meeting, in which each constituency branch brought 2 people, and Steve was there. And we spent 9 hours. Everybody got to speak. And then after everybody spoke, and Steve was able to give a rebuttal, and account for himself, there was a vote, and the vote took place right in front of him. And he lost almost unanimously. I think of 100 and something possible votes, I think he got 6. He then had agreed that he would come out the next day to support Gail Rigobert being put in as the new leader of the opposition, and he never came. And, I think that with conflicted views, many people said, look, Steve is a loyalist. He's hurt. Give him time. And certainly when Steve decided to come back and run with the party, I fully embraced him. Not only did we embrace him, that when we won the elections, Steve was given the largest ministry. He was not given a basket to carry water. He was the minister of infrastructure and got the largest budget in the history, between over $500 million in road projects, and then the airport project for almost $600 million. He got energy, he got labor, and he was given a lot of latitude in all of those things. So I did that, and I did it willingly, and I can say to Sohria, when a man sits in cabinet and he sits away from the table, the physical language becomes very clear. And this is why, when I was deciding to call the election, I decided to meet with Steve on the Sunday. I ended up calling the election on the Monday. So I met with Steve, and he said there were a couple of little things, issues he had, but other than that, he was good to go. We left there and we went on a TV show that night, which was on NTN. He gave a glowing report as to how the government was doing and the projects we were doing. And then the next day I announced the elections, and 2 days later, he sends me a letter, or sends the party a letter to express his regret and his concerns about the party, and decided that he was going to run independently. So it's our fault, because the signs were there, but we all gave Steve, and I'm very proud of that fact, we all gave Steve the benefit of the doubt. And I'm also very proud of the fact that I've not heard many United Workers' Party candidates come out and curse Steve. I think that we felt betrayed. I think that's a fair and reasonable emotion to have.
Of course.
And everybody wished him well, and I wish him well. I don't hate Steve, but I just feel that certainly I question his integrity. I question his honesty, and I wish him all the luck. But I certainly would not find myself trusting Steve to that extent anymore. And certainly what he's doing right now, and the statements he's making, are more humiliating, I think, for him, because he has to admit that he was in the cabinet. Don't come now and talk about the ills, because
exactly,
you're indicting yourself.
Yes, because what I'm saying, he spent 5 years in a party where he is now saying that, because when I really looked at his behavior, when I looked at his performance in the House of Parliament last week, Tuesday, it was like a vicious attack against you. And to me, clearly, this is not the behavior of any member of the United Workers' Party as a member of Parliament. So Stephenson King showed us that he is now with the Labour boys, and he really went at you. And at that moment, I looked at you and I saw you were very cool, calm, and collective. Now, when all that vicious attack was just thrown at you, and even to the point where when you called Richard Frederick your friend, he stood up like the demons were just coming out of him and got on, and then he said, "I'm not your friend." And then when he sat down, his mic was still on, and he spewed some vicious words at you, some profanity. And we know you take it in strides, you are humble, but you are a human being. And maybe somebody else may have flared up and gotten on, maybe even throw some chairs and stuff in the House of Parliament because of his behavior. So people are looking. I am going to tell you something now. You may have heard it, but I'm going to tell you it on my show tonight, that you are the most popular and loved politician in St. Lucia right now. People really respect you. People have been messaging me, calling me, people I don't even know, saying, so we really did something wrong. We only went on the narrative that this is a white man, he doesn't care for us, and now we are catching our royals. Now, what I need you to tell St. Lucians, they keep saying you took $328 million, which I've explained on my show already, that you took that money for your friends, families, and foreigners. And I know you have given many St. Lucians during the pandemic income support. So just explain to the people what you have done for St. Lucia during the pandemic in terms of helping them, income support, etc., etc.
So I think that sadly, a lot of St. Lucians, they're no different to a lot of people in the general public around the world. Mm-hmm. When they hear numbers, the numbers become very confusing to them. And I'm very much of a numbers-driven person. So let me try to set the scenario. When I came into government in 2016, the payroll of government was $43 million a month. The debt payments, that's interest and principal, was $30 million a month. So that's $73 million.
73 million.
And then the operating cost of government is another $30 million a month, of which rent is $6 million, just to give you an example. Right. Utilities, another $6 million. The IMF and the World Bank have, for the longest time, said we have too many staff. So we need to bring the payroll down. Yeah?
Yeah.
And when I did the analysis of the $43 million, 75% of that $43 million is teachers, nurses, and police officers.
Whoa.
Okay? Now, we don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough nurses.
Exactly.
We don't have enough
policemen.
officers.
Yes.
And more importantly, we certainly do not pay them enough money. So when you're telling me a person can be a police officer for 20 years and maybe he's getting $3,000 a month, and that there is no insurance and no life insurance if he's injured or loses his life or his limb and he can't work, the family suffers. Yeah? So I said, you can't, what are you going to do there? You have to find a different way to solve that problem. Of the 25% of the people who are remaining, 20% of those people, which is your PSs, your DPSs, and your senior officers, make 60% of the money.
Woo!
Right? So when we talk about the bureaucrats, you're really talking about less than 10%, $4 to $5 million a month is going to people below the grade 7.
Wow.
Okay? So you're talking about less than $2,000 or $2,500 a month. Yeah? So the solution is not the number of people. The solution is their productivity.
Exactly.
In terms of resolving the debt, so there's a neighboring island, Barbados or Grenada or St. Kitts, who've all gone through structural adjustment programs. And let's understand what that is. They come in and they cause people who have bonds and who own government of St. Lucia debt to take what we call a haircut. So let's say the government of St. Lucia owes you $1. They turn around and they say to you, we're only going to pay you 50 cents.
50 cents, yeah.
And instead of paying you back in 2 years, we're going to pay you back in 10 years. So Alan Chastanet's school of thought is that the government is getting the private sector and individuals to pay for the sins of government. Because it's the government's irresponsibility that got you in this place. They're not the ones paying the price. Everybody else is paying the price. But that is a prescription. And the reason they do that, Sohria, is to reduce the $30 million a month to maybe $15 million a month. To give you some fiscal space. To allow you to invest that money in other things to now reduce the deficit that was causing the problems in the first place. The third one is government operations. And really, it's e-government that is going to, I think, solve that problem in a more meaningful way. Now, you're talking about $105 million a month in expenses. And when I came into government, we were earning an average of $80 million a month.
Wow. So you have a
So that means that you were losing $25 million a month. So let's put it from a household perspective. I have a salary of $3,000. Between my mortgages and my utility bills, that the cost was $3,500. So that means it's $500 a month that you have to find somewhere else
exactly
to pay
a
for
financial gap. Yes.
Right? Or as people say, you juggle.
Yes.
So you may be a little bit late on your electricity bill this month.
Yes.
You're really late on this other bill next month. But the one bill you cannot be late on is your debt financing. Right? Because they'll take away your house from you or they take away your car from you.
Exactly.
So we had to remedy that gap. Now, how did that gap affect us? There's a very famous video clip that Norbert Williams keeps playing. And it's an interview with Kenny Anthony and Jadia, where Kenny says something went wrong and that the banks and other institutions would not lend us any more money. So what happened is that the successive years of this deficit of $25 million every month, $300 million a year, right? The government had to keep borrowing money to pay for the deficit. And when you're paying for a deficit, the economy doesn't grow.
No.
It's just sunk cost.
Yes.
Right? You're not investing money in any capacity changes. So the banks finally said, we're not going to lend you any more money until you resolve this deficit. They lost the election. And when I said to everybody it was going to take me 3 years, that's what it was going to take me 3 years to do, was to solve that deficit. And in the 3 years, I brought government's revenue up to $110 million. And by taking the tough decisions with National Trust, with Radio St. Lucia, Fisheries Complex, and these weren't things vendettas. I mean, with the National Trust, let's understand for a moment what's happened. The government of St. Lucia has vested into the National Trust thousands of acres of land. Pigeon Island, that beautiful one in Denry. What's it called again? Oh gosh, they do some festivals there.
Yeah, I can't remember the name.
Yeah, the Maria Islands. Okay, you go down properties in town. Now, the reason why the government put those properties into the National Trust was for two purposes. One, that those properties would be developed in a sustainable, environmentally way. Correct? Secondly, that it would generate revenue for the trust, so the trust can pay for itself. And it's not a burden on the state. That's why we gave them all these assets.
Exactly.
Okay? When I asked them to provide to me what they were going to do in Pigeon Island, because in my mind, Pigeon Island's a cash cow. They finally produced a report that a feasibility was done. They wanted to convert the museum there into a conference facility, and they wanted to move their headquarters onto Pigeon Island. The feasibility said that doesn't make any sense, because there already were a number of conference facilities up north. Then Royalton came, and then Harbor Club came. They would never make any money, so that made no sense. And what I found with the trust is, no matter how many conversations you have with them, they keep running away from the fact that they try to get into this emotional conversation. And then all of a sudden, when people like Richard Frederick and other very notorious political people became members and then elected executive members to the National Trust, I still did not take offense. I tried to handle it in the most calm way and the most respectful way, but doesn't mean that I'm going to be badgered into,
or bullied, exactly.
Bullied into doing something that I felt that was fundamentally wrong. But it's taking those tough decisions and guarding the monies of the state that eventually you start turning. What do they say? You know, to make money, you have to start saving pennies.
Exactly.
So people think that that's stupid, but that's the reality in life. And many solutions, I know they know that. They've made those sacrifices of saving the pennies. So government has to be the same way. So we were able to lower the VAT rate from 15% to 12.5%. And I think that stimulated businesses. We put a gas tax on so that there was money dedicated to building roads. And we put an airport tax on because 85-90% of the people paying the airport tax are tourists. So it had zero impact on the economy. The airport tax and the gas tax generated about $100 million a year. And we use those monies now to fund the construction of the airport project, to fund the road development projects that we were seeing, and to also to build up a sink fund for the government. Meanwhile, what happened is that government revenues went up. So these policies were very favorable. And as I said, the revenue went up to $110 million. Now, what happened was, and I could see it coming, because I said my experience at Air Jamaica when we had 9/11. During 9/11, the airline industry was globally shut down for 10 days. So I had experience to know that when the new protocols came in that would prohibit people from traveling, what would happen to the airline industry, and that it would not just come back right away, because somebody would have to write off all those losses. Our revenue in April of 2020, compared to the April before, went from $105 million to $45 million. And if you then take for the rest of the year, we averaged around $55-60 million a year. So that means that we were $40 to $50 million a month short. Let's put this in perspective. When you're earning $45 million in revenue, salaries are $43 million. Debt was $30 million. Operating costs, rent, etc., another $30 million. So it means that you were short $60 million a month in revenue. Yeah?
Wow.
The second thing that happened is that the cost went up. We had to open and convert Victoria Hospital. We had to rent hotels. We had to pay for confinements. We had to pay overtime for policemen and for nurses. So the cost went up almost $10 or $15 million a month. So your revenue dropped and your costs went up, right? Luckily for me, and I had a great team at the Ministry of Finance, we moved very quickly, and we were able to negotiate with the World Bank, with CDB, and with the IMF to borrow $30 million US from each of those institutions. So that generated about just under $300 million. Remember, the gap that we were trying to fill was close to $600 million.
Wow.
Okay. We then went to ECCB, the central bank, and to the local banks, and we increased our overdraft facility, the amount of money we were able to be borrowed on a monthly basis. And then thirdly, and I said this, that we stopped paying people. So payables in government were normally $30 million. Payables went up to $150 million. So it means that people who provided goods and services to the state, we were just very slow in paying them back.
Exactly.
So that is what financed the gap. So when people talk about the $300 million we borrowed it and they didn't get it, the $300 million went to pay for salaries and went to pay for the operating cost of the government, because we were not allowed to use the money to pay for debt. Exactly. So the tax revenue that we were generating, the 40 or 50 or $60 million, went to pay in large part for the debt. Now, there's a third component, Sohria, that a lot of solutions, no matter how many times I explain it, it's a different concept for them to understand. So the government has outstanding debt in the form of what's called a bond. Mm-hmm. So if you have savings, you buy a bond. Mm-hmm. You buy the bond for 6 months, you buy the bond for a year, or you buy the bond for 3 years. Mm-hmm. More often than not, people decide to roll over the bond. So when the bond comes due, instead of taking the money, you let the government keep the money and they continue to pay.
Yes.
Right? And that's why it's a non-budgeted item, because it always just rolls over.
Fluctuates, yeah. Yeah.
Because of COVID, people needed cash. Mm-hmm. And so 25% of the bonds that were due that year, which was $800 to $900 million, 25% of them was what we call redeemed. Mm-hmm. People wanted their cash.
Cash.
Okay? So that means that we had to find another $200 million to pay. And remember, I could not use the World Bank, the IMF, or the CDB money to do that.
They have their purpose.
Okay? They have their purpose. So the first income support that we did came from, very cleverly, we looked at NIC. And luckily for me, we had just done an analysis at NIC. And NIC's pension plan, if something doesn't change, will come to an end in 2050. Oh. It would no longer be viable. So, and that's normal. So it's nothing to get overly shocked at. Mm-hmm. What will happen is either people's contributions are going to have to go up, or the period in which people retire will be increased.
Increased, yeah.
Or a combination of those two. So we asked the question, if the NIC was to come to an end in 2049, how much money would they have had in 2049? And the answer was $100 million. So we said, okay, the NSC has the ability to grant to the persons who've been making a contribution to NIC $100 million right now to help them with their income support, because we don't have unemployment insurance in St. Lucia. Right. And that money was paid out based on your salary and the contributions that you were making. And because there's a cap at NIC, the amount that you got was also capped. Right. So that's where the first set of income support came from. The second set of income support came from because we had a loan with the Taiwanese to do the courthouses, etc. And we converted that into helping with income support and food supporting programs. It was about $20 million US that was distributed over the period of time to be able to help people. Buying computers for kids so that they could stay at home. So that is where the money was spent. Now, when you're confronted where globally tourism is not going to come back, your economy has contracted by 20%, right? And 80% of that contraction is because of tourism.
Exactly.
So can agriculture be expanded to make up that shortfall? Can you expand manufacturing? And remember, you couldn't ship things anywhere.
Exactly.
Right? What's the sector that you could rely on? So when Jamaica had problems with its call center business, we immediately made some phone calls. And ITEL BPO came, KM Squared picked up some accounts, and we saw about 2,000 new jobs being created in that sector. We knew construction was the only sector that we could stimulate fast. And we also knew that if we could stimulate construction sector and we did it the right way, that when we come out of COVID, we would be stronger because we'd have built up the capacity. And there was a very famous line that was used in the elections. You have to hand it to the Labour Party. We can't eat roads.
Roads, yeah.
Right? You can't eat roads. And, I met a person in my constituency, and he said, Prime Minister, tell him for me, right? Roads help me eat.
Exactly.
Okay? So if you go to Park Estate, nobody went there. Now that the road's been fixed up, people are going there. And people now, the little shops are getting business, etc. Maintenance in the cars go down. So the reality is that capacity change, it has an immediate impact on everyone. Nobody has to say which party they support when they drive on a road. Okay, there's not a toll that says, are you Flabo or are you Labour? Who do you support? It's equal to everyone.
Everybody.
When you fixed up schools, we don't ask who the students and who their families support. When we fixed up the healthcare centers, nobody asks what political party you are. This is about building your nation and improving the quality of life for people in this country. Where did that money come from? That money came from because the loans that we had with the Taiwanese had what's called a 5-year moratorium. So we only pay the interest for the first 5 years, and we only start paying back the principal 5 years afterwards.
Exactly.
That came to we earn about $30 million a year. So we said we have about $150 million that we can lend in the next borrow in the next 5 years. Now, the banks were not going to lend us the money. We already increased the overdraft facilities. The banks would have seen that our revenue had gone down. So we went to 4 construction companies. One of them said they couldn't raise the money. Nationwide, Fresh Start, and Renault each put $50 million in. They borrowed the money on their debt, and we pay back the money like a rent from the savings that we are getting from having the moratorium on the loan, right? And so that added to the West Coast Road, that added to the Cul-de-sac Bridge, that added to the St. Jude's Hospital, that added to the airport project that we were already doing. The big one now, and if we talk about the half-truths, so the Prime Minister would read out in the House all these direct awards, right? So this is the half-truth story again. So when you read them out and you don't put them in the context that they need to be, it seems that, there was something that was corrupt that was done. So what were those direct awards really about? Not all of them, but the vast majority were. Ministry of Economic Development, after Hurricane Thomas, had negotiated a loan agreement with the World Bank called DVRP. And this was a project specifically to help strengthen the resilience of our infrastructure. Drains, slope stabilization, putting utility wires on the ground, those kinds of things, coastal repairs, etc. When COVID came, all of those projects would need to go out to tender. And they have to go to international tendering. And the requirement is so high that many local companies cannot qualify
for it, yeah.
So what Guy Joseph did is he worked with the World Bank and he said, look, we need to use construction to help stimulate the economy and make up for the shortfall of tourism. We cannot get international firms here right now because nobody's traveling.
Exactly.
So the governor of St. Lucia will pay to get somebody to design the work and provide the supervision in the work. Can we break the projects down into smaller pieces? So let's take my constituency. Several miles of roads of drains were done. And what they did is they broke it out into smaller pieces and put all of those pieces out to tender. And local guys, at least 3 of them had to apply for the tendering to qualify.
Yes.
So it means that all of the contracts were given on a tendering basis, and the size of the projects were small enough that very small contractors could benefit. But what was done by a direct award was the design and the supervision. And let's understand what a direct award is. It's a document that the Prime Minister signs that gives permission for that contract not to go to tender. And so when you get the letter, it gives you an explanation in a letter from the PS and the technocrats as to why they're making that request.
Right.
So this is not the Prime Minister personally selecting somebody and giving them the contract. This has to go through and vetted by the several ministries. The ministries all have departments that assess the work program and how much it's going to cost. And then those numbers are vetted by the Ministry of Finance. So there are two separate ministries that actually vet all of those numbers. To give you an example, up until the end of 2019, and in comparison to the first 3 years of the Labour Party between 2011 and 2014, they had given more direct awards than we had. The issuance of direct awards really came in a bigger number because of COVID.
COVID, yes.
And what are we trying to do? Save time. Get these projects started as fast as humanly possible so we can get work on the ground and get moving. Now, I have to be honest with you that I have said this story over and over. I've been on NTN, I've been on different shows, I've repeated endlessly. And when I was in Parliament this time, and Philip Peer and them said they never knew that there was payables of $150 million. I'm certainly going to get them to play
the tapes,
my tapes of my presentation in Parliament with the budget. And you can go to numerous shows on NTN where I explain and I lamented it. I said, this is a horrible thing because people have provided the goods and services and they're not going to get paid. And that the state could only rely on that for a very short period of time because eventually people are going to say, pay me my money first. Because I'm not going to do any more work for the government.
Exactly.
So it's short-lived. So in essence, that is where the money went. We families and friends. I don't know where this coming. The only family and friend network that I know of is when you have a minister who now has his best friend. We all know that, Arnold, as chairman of Invest in Lucia. He has one lawyer as chairman of CIP. He has his other lawyer as chairman of what do you call it, Tourism Authority. He has another lawyer as the Attorney General in the party, and his best friend's son is his attaché, and the list goes on.
And his best friend is Invest St. Lucia. You missed that one.
Yeah, this is the hypocrisy that you see, and then now they've changed Nestor, and they're going to be bringing somebody in pretty soon, and that's another very tight friend that's coming in. They're going to be changing Mr. Sherry at Invest St. Lucia. Professional person, non-political, both of them.
Yeah, I know. Right? I know Mr. Sherry personally. I grew up with Mr. Sherry. Yeah, he's very professional.
They don't have I lamented it that they didn't have a political bone in their body, right? But the fact is, you're going to go and you're going to change these people, and who are you going to put? You're going to put people who are strongly associated. Now, what solutions need to be concerned about, Sohria, is who is going to be mining for them? Who's watching out for them? Who's safeguarding?
Oh, this is scary. This is scary, Uncle Chas. This is scary when we are realizing that this government, they have in our investment portfolio, we have lawyers associated to a minister that is very close to a minister, and their mantra was putting the people first. But they did put their friends first and not the people of St. Lucia. And it is sad, like you say, when you have people like Roddy Cherry and Nestor. But before I speak about Roddy and Nestor, let me ask you, Uncle Chas, Ernest Hilaire made a very damning allegation. He said that data was deleted. CIP files was deleted. Can you share any light on that? Because I am wondering if the people at CIP or wherever would just go there and delete files. Can you share some light concerning that statement?
Well, the statement was even more damning because he said that Nestor did it at my behest.
Yes, I forgot to say that. Yes, he said Nestor did it at your behest. Correct.
So I challenge anybody to provide any evidence in which I directed the CIP board to do anything. If I directed the CIP board to do anything, was to strengthen their background checks and their governance. So when I came in, files were not going through the proper channels through the regional security forces, I personally got involved to make sure that that was being done the right way. And I'm very proud of the fact that St. Lucia was dropped from the human trafficking watch list because of the improvements that we made in our CIP program. Nestor comes from a background of governance. He would not ever allow me to do that. And from what I understand, is that he didn't even have the codes to access the database. So it means that the person in charge of IT would have had to have done that. I hope that Nestor does something about it, because I think that Nestor allowed his contract to be terminated prematurely, and he thought he had done it on a mutual basis. And I think that he is very shocked to hear that the allegations that the minister is making now. But look who's making the allegations.
Exactly. Look
this
at
is
him.
a guy. I mean, this is a guy that, when he was the High Commissioner, made the decision, and he lied to the British government. He said that the car belonged, first of all, to Tafal Williams. Then he said the car belonged to the High Commission, and he wrote letters to that effect. Cannot explain now how the car ended up back in his name, right? And we have a whole system protecting it. And this is my concern, really, of what's going on in St. Lucia right now. And that Ernest would make those kinds of allegations. I know that Nestor will hopefully defend, or I believe he'll defend himself.
He should.
But he's a very integral person. Anybody who knows him and knows his family, this guy would never do anything dishonest. And I think that he served St. Lucia extremely well. And I think we were all very proud of what the board and himself had achieved at CIP. I don't know, with the kind of cast of characters they have there now, what's going to happen to St. Lucia's reputation. But sadly, given the friendship relationship that exists there, it'll probably be a very long time before we find out when something is going wrong.
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask you, Uncle Chas, the world is watching St. Lucia, especially the U.S. government. And what is your take on we having ministers in government whose visas are revoked permanently, or maybe parliamentarians, ministers of government are not going to get their diplomatic visas, and all these sorts of things? How does the U.S. Embassy or the U.S. government, how do they look at our government, more so the people of St. Lucia, when our own ministers may not have a visa or cannot get a visa?
Well, I can't speak for the U.S. government. I can just say to you that generally, countries are very hesitant to pass any criticism or any comments on how independent states govern themselves. Mm-hmm. And the geopolitics in today's world has become very complicated. Mm-hmm. The world in many ways is being divided between East and West. Mm-hmm. And then there are persons who try to bridge between both East and West. Mm-hmm. I think it's more of an indictment, honestly, Sohria, on us. Why should we be looking for somebody on the outside to be our police officer? Exactly. Okay, so the idea that a person that we all know, we all read as to what has happened to him, mm-hmm. How can Philip Pierre and the Labour Party justify putting him in the cabinet? But if there's only one person asking that question, or a couple of people asking that question, they're going to ignore it. We're the pressure groups, I admire the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I think that they're world-renowned when it comes to mediation and how they handle the situation between Guy Joseph and Joachim Henry. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it's just me. The government has 15 ministers. So you mean all the ministers that they had to choose, they made Joachim Henry the Minister of Ecclesiastical Affairs?
Yeah, I was like, what is this?
And I sit here and I go, okay. Is it just me that sees that?
No, right? Everybody saw that. Everybody saw that.
And who's saying anything? Who's putting the pressure on? Who's writing the letters? Okay? So unless those pressures are put on. So what's taking place, and I need to be so very careful with what's taking place at Cabot, because I know that some people want to make this about access to beach. This was never been about access to beach. Okay, in all of the agreements with Cabot, solutions were guaranteed and assured access through a private property to get to the beach.
Exactly.
And for free.
Exactly.
So they would just go and the golf cart would be bringing them to the beach. But to revoke, and that's what the part I want to focus on. I don't want to focus on the other part because I think that all the evidence is there to explain that, and people can decide how they want to interpret the facts. What is more worrisome, Sohria, is that Cabinet revoked a Cabinet conclusion on a commercial on a commercial agreement. So let me bring this down. Let's say you identify some land that's owned by the Crown, by the government of St. Lucia, and the Crown decides they're going to give you a 30-year lease. You go to the bank, you tell the bank, I don't own the land, but I'm going to be renting this land for 30 years. The bank takes that in as part of the collateral. Now, you know that lease is guaranteed because it has a Cabinet conclusion with it. If in fact now a Cabinet conclusion can be revoked, will the banks continue accepting government leases and government guarantees as collateral? So I want to leave the Cabot situation alone. I think people are much more capable than I am in discussing that matter in terms of beach access, because Queen's Chains have been a very vexing issue for a very long time. And people get very emotional about that. I really want to just focus on what the government did. And to make matters worse is that an experienced politician like Stephenson King would come out and make a public statement before they had discussed it with Cabot. Really?
This is so
imagine
unethical.
if you're a business person, let's leave Cabot out, and you had a lease of property, the government publicly revokes that lease, and you had people who you were renting to and making investments in it, and they're finding out about it at the same time. They're going to come and say, Sohria, I thought you had an agreement.
Exactly.
You said, well, I did, but they revoked it. They're going to say, well, what other agreements do you have with government that can be revoked?
Exactly.
Because we thought that once you had a Cabinet conclusion, this was decisive.
Exactly.
So you know what we call that? Reputational damage.
Yes.
Okay? And the key foundation of reputational or having a reputation is a very simple word. It's called trust. So again, I like to put some things in layman's terms. Say a married couple, both of them find out they've been cheating on each other. And they say, you know what, for the sake of the kids, I forgive you, will you forgive me? And you both forgive each other.
Right.
The trust doesn't come back right away.
No,
you can't forgive the trust. You have to build back the trust. So here it is that an instrument, a legal instrument that has been with us for a very, very long time, and that has meant something. What they have done now is they've created a new precedence.
Yes, they
and this
have.
This is a very sad day for St. Lucia. I'm certainly hoping that the government will reconsider what they've done. And I think that if, in fact, they want to do the project differently with Cabot, they're entitled to do that. But it needs to be under mutual consent.
Exactly.
It cannot be that you bully them publicly, because I think it's going to send a signal to anybody who wants to invest. And I'm not just talking about foreigners. Locals, regional, and persons from internationally are going to sit here and say, wow, I'm going to be embarrassed by the government and allegations that are going to be made against me, even though they're not true. And I'm going to be forced to compromise based on moral persuasion. I mean, that's crazy. Crazy what's going on.
It is crazy. And another thing I wanted to ask you before we leave, where do you see our tourism industry going? Because from what I'm seeing being done by Ernest Hilaire and the Tourism Authority, it doesn't augur well for the industry. How does the tourism industry, from your vantage point, and with what this government is doing, how do you view, or where do you see our tourism industry heading to?
Um, the reality with tourism is that the decisions that you're making today, you'll feel the impact of them 9 months to a year later. So, there's an old saying, you don't shoot the duck where it is, you shoot the duck where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen so far, that this government doesn't have a clue in terms of what's going on. So the numbers of arrivals currently coming in, particularly from the U.S. market, are very soft. The airlines more than likely will make a decision as to the summer and fall's schedule. So if the numbers are soft in the wintertime, they're going to adjust the capacity, because they adjust the capacity every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
We had spent a very long time in building up the confidence of the U.S. So the airlift that you're seeing today, imagine this: you have JetBlue from Boston,
Mm-hmm.
you have 2 JetBlue flights a day from New York. Sorry, not a day, but on Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
You have a JetBlue flight from Newark. Then you have a United flight from Newark. You have a United flight from Chicago and an American Airlines from Chicago. You have American Airlines from Dallas. You have American Airlines from Charlotte. You have a daily flight from Atlanta. And you have some days a week, 2 flights a day from Miami.
Mm-hmm.
You have Virgin. You have BA. You have Thompson's from London. And you have WestJet, Sunwing, and Air Canada from Toronto. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But that came by building confidence and working with those partners.
Yes.
And putting together a marketing strategy. So what did we know? Because of COVID, the global competition in tourism, Sohria, shrunk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because Australia is only reopening its borders at the end of February.
Yeah.
Right? So make hay
While
while the sun is shining.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do is you gain market share, and then when the world opens up, hopefully you continue to be able to grow. But if you're on momentum is going downwards, then that momentum is going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, I'm starting to see that shift in the marketplace. And the government, I don't think that they know what they're doing. I think that they're going to have significant financial problems because they've dug themselves into a hole. The restructuring of tourism was done where the hotel tax now is going directly into the tourism authority. If the tourism arrivals go down, it means the money that they're going to have is also going to go down. So it may be a period of time in which the government may have to top up the tourism authority.
Yeah.
But the way that they talk about tourism and some of the things that they say, are they going to have the courage? Are they going to have the wherewithal to be able to make that investment? Because marketing is not a cost. Marketing is an investment in your brand. Mm-hmm. And you really have to be able to know and feel that in your heart to have the courage to be able to move forward, because that's what you're doing. So let me give you a classic example. Mm-hmm. We had negotiated with and had worked with the West Indies cricket for some time. Mm-hmm. And St. Lucia had become one of the favorite places for West Indies to play. Mm-hmm. And 2 years ago, before COVID, we had the British tour here. And it was in February. And man, the country was rammed. The bars were full of Kiwis and Gros Islet every night. I mean, the place was just packed. It was a phenomenal success. What it also does, it means all those media houses are here, and St. Lucia's being exposed in the UK market every single day.
Exactly.
I don't know for what reason, but Ernest decided that he was not going to work with West Indies cricket.
So crazy.
And which I think is because of their love for Barbados. Mm-hmm. They ended up allowing all of the cricket to go to Barbados. So Barbados got the 2 test match, and they got 5 T20s. Mm-hmm. So Barbados is on TV in the UK market from the beginning of February all the way to the end of March. Mm-hmm. Hotels are full, etc. And what that means is that when the summertime comes, that Barbados would have benefited from all of that TV exposure. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And they're going to boom. And it coincided with when the UK dropped all of its protocols for travel. Okay? So it became a significant windfall. And so after all the things we did, and I want you to listen to this number very carefully. In 2021, St. Lucia had twice as many tourism arrivals as Barbados. That tells you the success of coexisting with COVID and the protocols and what we did to have tourism borders stay open and protect people to the best of our, impossible completely, but to protect them to the best of our ability. Yeah? Whereas Barbados kept changing their protocols, they're all over. St. Lucia remained very consistent, managed our stuff internally, worked with the airlines, and continued to grow. We're seeing in 6 months, all of that good work and hard work is being undone. And it's going to take a period of time before it's going to ever happen again. You know, one day I'd like to return on your show, Sohria.
Yeah.
And really, for your listeners to hopefully appreciate building a new St. Lucia, what that was all about.
You're welcome anytime.
Okay?
You're welcome.
And the fundamentals and the assumptions that went in to designing building a new St. Lucia. It was not just a tagline. It really was a philosophy, and it was really to take St. Lucia to a completely different level. And I'm not a person who likes mediocrity. I don't like to be second in anything. And I think that solutions can do much better than we're currently doing.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And one more thing before we wrap it up. In terms of our new Prime Minister, he is asking us to eat more fig vet. Tell us about the agriculture industry in your time, because based on my research, the agricultural industry only contributes 2% to the GDP. So it actually says to me that we have a prime minister who doesn't really have a plan to grow the economy. So just give me and my viewers an insight into the agricultural industry when you were prime minister.
So the first part was the 7 crops. So where the 7 crop idea came from is when I was Minister of Tourism. Ezekiel, who was the Minister of Agriculture, and I worked very closely together. I made a presentation to the Ministry of Agriculture for them to understand how hotels, particularly all-inclusive hotels, work. The all-inclusive hotels want to be able to feed people at a particular cost, and they bring that cost down to on a per person basis per night. So it's around 11 to 15 US dollars per day to feed people. What products they use to make that price, they don't care. So if you have products that we don't produce in St. Lucia and you have a high duty rate on them, that will come at the expense of the products that we do sell. So they're going to try to bring down the price as much as possible. So when Ezekiel and his team saw that, and they got it and said, okay, well, let's become self-sufficient on the things that we can produce, because the hoteliers would be actually willing to pay a higher price on the basis that we lowered the duties on the things that we cannot produce. So that the $11 or $12 remains the same, but the impact to our economy becomes much greater.
Right.
But to make that happen, Sohria, you need to be able to produce these products on a year-round basis. Because if, in fact, they're only going to get them for a certain months of the year and then you have to import them from Miami, then the costs will go up. And it becomes very inconsistent.
Yes.
So the thing that you need is water, which is greenhouses and hydroponics and better irrigation systems on a year-round basis, because that was the limiting factor. And so working with the Taiwanese, we were working very hard at doing that. Now, you just said the number 2%. The things that we're going to produce are really for consumption on the island and those tourists that are going to be coming in.
Okay.
That's a limited number. The only other thing that you can do is possibly, because it's fresh produce, is to send that products to within the region. So St. Vincent and Dominica have done a great job. So going up to the U.S. Virgin Islands, to the British Virgin Islands, and then to Barbados. Those are the markets, and really was about making sure we had a proper shipment place. Now, we know every single week how many tomatoes we need, how many watermelons we need, etc. Right. So you give the contracts now to the farmers.
Yes.
So a farmer now knows before he plants anything that he has sale for the product. He knows what price he's going to get, and he knows what quality he needs to be able to achieve. And now with monitoring through the GPS system, we know the status of what those vegetables are. Because if you want 100 tomatoes, you may have to grow 130 tomatoes
Yes.
to get that number.
Yes.
Okay? So these are all the systems that we were putting in place. In the medium term to long term, what you want to do is, can we find byproducts with those products? So I keep saying to people, mango, tamarind, what you do is you make it into concentrate, and then you freeze the concentrate. And then you use the concentrate to make cakes, to make other juices, etc., because it lasts longer. If we treat it just as a fresh produce, very, very difficult to make that happen. So this is where the entrepreneurship comes, with people coming up with ideas as to how they're going to use it. The other crop that we feel that has a huge potential in St. Lucia is cocoa. Cocoa, because it is an environmentally or climate change resilient product. It can withstand hurricanes. It's a great root crop. I mean, it has strong roots, so it holds the soil. So building and growing it on hillsides, etc., actually helps. And because of the way it is, you can do what's called intercropping. So you don't have to just have the cocoa. But here's the beautiful thing about cocoa, is that we're now finding that we can do cocoa sticks and we can make chocolate. So the actual price that we're getting for the end product versus what you would get for the wet seed is completely different.
Yes.
And what we were trying to do is to work a mechanism where the farmers could sell, but the byproducts, they would also get a percentage of that sale, because they're not going to make enough money just selling the wet seed.
Right.
And so it's in sharing and that added value business you're going to get into. So the other big industry that we have here agriculturally, and both cocoa and bananas are important because there is an endless demand for it globally. St. Lucia could never supply the total demand for bananas in the world. Ever. Right? So once you can produce a good quality banana at the right price,
Yes.
there is an endless market for it. So many years ago, when Sir John was there, the government managed the banana industry, and the farmers focused on growing. They had Winera that did the boxes, they had Windman that did the research, and they did all the quality control. So this is very, very simple for everyone to understand. If you take a banana, a green banana, you put it in a box here in St. Lucia, you ship it to the UK, it's then taken from the dock to the warehouse, they ripen it, and if you wait to that point to determine if it is it doesn't meet the quality, how do you recover the money lost?
Exactly.
You've already paid for it to be shipped, you already paid for the handling costs, you paid for the ripening room, and now you also have to pay for the banana to be disposed of. So what was happening is the companies that were handling this process for St. Lucia and for some of the other islands, but primarily St. Lucia, would deduct that cost from the money that they were sending down. And so the money was always short.
Right.
Now, how do you explain to a farmer down here, boss, your banana was rejected in the UK? He doesn't trust it. Oh, they're thieving the money, and this went on and on and on. And the reality is, Sohria, is that we have the capability of doing a better job of quality control before the banana leaves here. And so these are the changes that we were making, is NFTO, which became totally controlled by the farmers, did not have the capacity to do that. And so what we said is, every time that NFTO owed money, for the exact same reason I just told you, guess who they went to get the money? The government of St. Lucia. Right? And then everybody has a soft heart for our farmers, and deservedly so.
Yeah.
And everybody would feel bad not paying them the money. And then they say, well, we're going to pay you back the money in the next shipment. The next shipment never comes because they do the same thing all over again, and they continuously fall themselves into debt. To make matters worse, Sohria, there was an entity called Windfresh that was put together to handle the bananas in the UK. And when St. Vincent and Dominica and Grenada got out of the banana business, they didn't understand what benefit they were getting from Windfresh. So Windfresh invested in different companies in St. Lucia, Dominica, St. Vincent, and Grenada. And none of those investments ever generated a profit. And so Windfresh found a very clever way, accountingly, to transfer monies from Windfresh to cover the losses in those entities. But because of the accounting laws in the UK, eventually it caught up with them. And they needed to find £12 million to cover those losses. Now, you think any one of those islands were going to do it? They said, no, man, you can go and sell the products. It could be, but the investments they made would even recover that money. So Windfresh is gone. We were going to invest, and we said we needed to hold a chairmanship position in the FTO, and we were going to put money in to strengthen FTO, to improve the processes of the bananas. And meanwhile, the Taiwanese were helping us produce different banana plants that were shorter, a bit more resilient, because when we had the hurricane just before the election, the wind level was not even high enough to trigger the insurance premium, but 95% of the crops were gone. So, banana is a very, very difficult industry. We were going to actually go into a significant branding exercise with, what's the name of the agency in St. Lucia? Export St. Lucia, both for cocoa and for bananas. So here's the idea, Sohria. People must know when they come to visit St. Lucia that we have the best bananas. So they must be billboards, pins on the staff at the hotels. We must have banana bread. We must have all of these byproducts of bananas, but with the idea of exporting them.
Exactly.
Because St. Lucians already eat bananas. I think that's really what the whole joke was, is, St. Lucians already enjoy bananas. So to say that we need to eat more bananas was really, just tells you the same way he said he only now understands tourism. Clearly it means that he only just now understands agriculture.
But he doesn't go into the supermarket.
I think that's a safe assumption to be able to make. Yeah. But what we wanted to do was to get St. Lucians to start making byproducts. I always used to talk about Tortuga rum cake. Tortuga rum cake was a Jamaican guy. Then he couldn't get a job in Cayman. His wife was there. He remembered his mother's recipe, made Tortuga rum cake, and now he's producing Tortuga rum cake all over the world. It started in Cayman.
Exactly.
So let us, if we had a banana coconut bread, we do some really fantastic products, but let's produce it, package it, make sure that every single tourist that comes here sees it, loves it, and then we now start growing that market. And this is really the biggest fallacy in St. Lucia. Somehow we've got it in our heads that tourism displaces our culture. It strengthens our culture. It doesn't displace manufacturing. It strengthens it. It doesn't displace the financial services. It strengthens it. It doesn't displace our culture, our history. Okay, it helps us to strengthen it because we start loving it more. That's what differentiates us as a destination, and we must have pride in it. And that's what Independence event. I said, if I had to go to another independence ceremony and there's nobody in the stadium, maybe one child waving a flag and making the stupidest speeches ever, we forgot what this was about. This was about our nationalism, our patriotism. And I was so proud of the amendments that we made. I'm so sorry that COVID came, because I can't even imagine what Carnival in 2020 and what independence would have been based on the momentum we had been generating. But, hopefully St. Lucians remember these things, Sohria. And I have always said, the beautiful thing is that politics is a journey. It's not a destination. Okay? And development is not a destination. It's a journey. People, once they reach a certain standard of living, will always aspire for a higher standard. And that's why Prime Minister Sir John used to say we're relatively poor. We never compare ourselves to Africa. We were comparing ourselves to America. So the standard, I think, that we introduced as a government, the budget processes, the strategic thought that went into all of these different areas, hopefully would have raised the standard for solutions. And I'm hoping that people will now see when a government is bluffing, they'll see it for themselves. And they know that we can do better.
Yeah, and Uncle Chas, we really, really appreciated the discourse, because my goal tonight was to give you a chance to speak and to let the people of St. Lucia hear, and hoping that my viewers would share it with other people, their friends, and let them hear what you had and what you are going to do for the people of St. Lucia, because we have a government right now and they need to understand that it is time to work. Alan Chastanet and the United Workers' Party are no longer there, and they are in charge, and it's time to work for the people of St. Lucia. And it was just a joy. It was just a pleasure having you. So just say your final words to my viewers. It was very interesting, and you are always welcome again.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you very much. And I just wanted to say that being in government is always, you have to be able to multitask. And when I hear the government, lament the number of changes that are taking place on a daily basis, that's just the reality. Mm-hmm. And tonight, we touched on a lot of things, but we didn't touch on even close to everything.
Yeah.
We didn't speak about our plans for healthcare.
Yes.
We didn't speak about our plans for education. We didn't speak about our plans for sports development. We didn't speak about our plans for the development of entrepreneurship and trademarking. We didn't speak about our plans for the opportunities now we see because of what's happened in the world from COVID. International companies are 1/3 of their workforce is not going to go back to the office. So it means now they can hire people globally. It means you can be here living at home and you can work for Apple. You can work for Google. You can work for so many different companies. And the question is, does the government see that opportunity, and how are they going to help?
I don't think so.
And how are they going to facilitate it? So, there's a very famous business in the States called WeWork. So imagine building some WeWork stations where young people can now go and they have computers and they have conference facilities and they have printing and there's very strong Wi-Fi, and so that they can actually work from there for other countries in the world, business in the world. So we have a lot more to discuss. I can say to you, building a new St. Lucia was holistic. And that's why I'm saying to you that one day I'd look forward to coming back, that we can talk about the genesis of building a new St. Lucia, which is about a very simple word, potential. How do you measure the potential of St. Lucia? And in understanding that potential, then what's the plan in order to be able to achieve it as fast as possible?
Yes, thank you so much, Uncle Chas. It was a pleasure having you. And I know you are a busy man, even though you're not the Prime Minister of St. Lucia again. I know you're still busy as the leader of the opposition and the leader of your political party. We want to say a special good night to your wife, because many times we see the men in power, but we know their wives have their back, and the wives go through all the pains, all the emotions you go through. So we want to say thank you to you. We want to say thank you to your wife and to your family, your kids, for having you here tonight to speak to us. So we're going to see you again, Uncle Chas, and thank you for coming.
We will. I just want to say one thing to my extended family of Micoud South.
Yes.
None of this would have been possible without your prayers, your support, and continuing to believe in me. And the dream that we had for the South. So again, I want to say to all of you, thank you so very much.
You are very welcome, and I'm sure the people of Micoud South really love you. Now, my viewers, we went overboard tonight because we had a special guest, Uncle Chas. So I will not be here on tomorrow with you. I will be with you on Wednesday, same time, 8:30. And I really appreciate you all. Thanks for the views. Thanks for the love. I saw so many coffees popping. Thanks for the coffee. So is here to bring you the truth. And Uncle Chas did just that. So have a wonderful evening. God bless, and so love you all. Bye.